The Wisconsin Assembly is scheduled to vote Tuesday on a historical deal, largest deal, state and private business, with Foxconn, an international giant. 2015 revenues of $141 billion. The numbers are staggering. A potential $10 billion investment in Wisconsin, 20 million square feet of manufacturing space, potentially 13,000 Wisconsin workers on a Foxconn campus yet to be located. But in exchange, the state would give that private business up to $2.85 billion in tax credits. To preview that debate, I want to thank two representatives for having this civil dialogue. Republican Representative Adam Neylon of Pewaukee represents the 98th District. He also chairs the Assembly Committee on Jobs and the Economy, which voted 8-5 yesterday to recommend the deal. And Democratic Representative Jimmy Anderson of Fitchburg represents the 47th District. Gentlemen, thanks for doing the civil dialogue. It's a fascinating, historical opportunity.
No doubt.
Your committee voted for it. Give us a minute on why it's a good deal, please.
Sure.
Adam.
Well, I think you touched on a lot of the reasons it's a good deal. First of all, we're bringing investment, a substantial investment to Wisconsin, and one of the largest investments, if not the largest foreign investment in America in the history of investments in America. So I think that is huge, first of all. Also, we would be the only electronics manufacturer in North America. That, to me, is reason alone to consider this package, to be on the forefront of something that is going to be not only historic, but have potential for huge future growth. And also, you touched on the 13,000 jobs, and also the ancillary jobs, some of these side jobs that will go in to the supply chain. You know, I read a report, 35,000 jobs potentially with this investment. And I think this legislation, it's not about government revenue. It's about creating family-supporting jobs and bringing investment into Wisconsin.
Really quickly, before we get to Jimmy, you and I read Facebook and the social media.
Sure.
It's been called a giveaway by Mayor Soglin, corporate welfare and a subsidy. Could you just quickly respond to those allegations before we give Representative Anderson a chance?
Sure. I think that it's an investment in our future. And when you look at the overall budget, you know, 80% of our budget goes to education and healthcare. And that won't change with this piece of legislation. We are able to make this investment without raising taxes, and we are able to do it based on growth. We will have additional money, and we think this is targeted economic incentives that are able to create jobs, grow our economy. And when you look at the objectives of the Committee on Jobs and the Economy, this hits all of our bullet points: bringing investment into Wisconsin, creating good family-supporting jobs, and really bringing, you know, this is going to be a brain gain, if I've heard it said, not a brain drain. For too long, we lose workers in Wisconsin. This is going to attract workers to Wisconsin. We're going to reverse that trend, and I think that is worth investing in.
Representative Anderson, thanks for your patience. In a press release on July 26th, you said this: Foxconn should be paying Wisconsin. Do you want to talk about your feelings on the proposed deal, please?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with what Adam said there, but I'll just start with the fact that we're going to be spending roughly $3 billion of taxpayer money to bring Foxconn here to the state of Wisconsin. Now, between the manufacturing and agricultural tax credit, which already drops their tax liability to nearly zero, and then with the refundable tax credits that this particular deal gives Foxconn, that's essentially taking the money out of the pockets of the Wisconsin taxpayers, funneling through the state of Wisconsin and giving it directly to the executives of Foxconn. I don't think that that's the way that we should be doing business here in the state. I think it's irresponsible, and I think it really puts the taxpayers on the hook, particularly given the way that the legislation is written. When you look at the clawback provisions, they're not even mandatory. So I offered an amendment that would change simply just one word, that the WEDC would be required to claw back the money if they didn't actually perform up to the standards that the legislation requires. And it was voted down on party line vote. So I'm incredibly worried for the taxpayers of the state of Wisconsin that they're going to be the ones that are going to be on the hook for this deal.
And my follow-up for you is, what about Governor Walker's statement? If they don't build a thing, if they don't hire one person, they don't get any of the $2.85 billion, Representative.
So if you look again at the actual wording of the legislation, that's just not true. So it's up to the WEDC to design the actual parameters of this bill, and it's unknown at this point as to whether or not what those standards are going to be and how those year-to-year payouts are going to work. So if you look particularly at the clawbacks, they only work on a year-to-year basis. So that means that as long as the WEDC approves the taxpayer money to go to Foxconn in each of those years, that money is going to stay in Foxconn forever. So at most, we'd only get back a single year's worth of taxpayers' money if they don't live up to those standards.
Are you against a deal, or are you against a company that we could be doing the deal with, Representative?
So I think that there's a much smarter way that we could have handled this. This should be a regional project. We should have brought in Illinois. We should have brought in Illinois. We should have brought in Indiana. Other states are going to be betting from this, and that way we could spread the the risk, I guess you could say, of this deal. So we could have done this in a much smarter way. Instead, for whatever reason, and I genuinely think that it's because Governor Walker wants to use this as a way to earn re-election, that we've essentially put all the risk onto the backs of Wisconsin taxpayers.
Representative Neylon, Fiscal Bureau Director Lang says this is about trust. Have you had a chance to personally meet with executives of Foxconn, or are you relying on the governor's office, DOA, and REDIC in this deal?
Sure.
What's your level, your comfort level of trust with the Foxconn promises and the executives that are making them?
Sure. Yeah, I have met with representatives of Foxconn. And I trust that when a company makes a $10 billion investment into a state, they're not just going to up and leave with an enormous facility without filling it. I think that it would make no economic sense to invest all this money to build and construct a facility of this magnitude just for a few $1 million that they would gain from Wisconsin. When they make this level of commitment by investing so much in southeastern Wisconsin, they're going to do what it takes to fill those positions. And I think that ultimately this deal will be a good investment, and it will go to Wisconsin. And to Jimmy's point, Indiana, Illinois, all these states, they were brought in, but guess what? Wisconsin won. Wisconsin was the one that was able to have Foxconn invest in our state, and ultimately it's going to be great for the state as a whole.
I have to say that the idea of
Go
winning,
ahead, this is a simple dialogue. Go ahead.
No. Yeah. The idea of winning essentially is that we offered the most. So essentially, this is a race to the bottom amongst all 50 states to see which state is going to be willing to put up the most of the taxpayer money in order to attract these kinds of businesses. So instead of working collaboratively with states, what we did was we undercut everybody else. And to sit there and say that, oh, well, maybe another state would have offered a higher amount of taxpayer money. Well, we also offered a lot of we cut back on a lot of environmental regulations in order to try to attract Foxconn here to the state, probably more so than what other states were willing to offer, because that also has an economic value. So to say that we didn't offer the most, which is what I heard Governor Walker say, I think is a bit disingenuous. But again, this is a question as to whether or not we should be working collaboratively with other states to try to bring in economic investment, or if we should be trying to undercut other states to try to bring in economic investment. I'm for collaboration.
Sure. Please respond, Adam.
We do work collaboratively with other states, and that's why we have reciprocity agreements. So when Illinois workers come over the border and they work in Wisconsin, they still pay Wisconsin taxes. So I think we have worked in collaboration with other states, and that's how we got to this point. And if Wisconsin workers travel to Illinois and work in Illinois, they pay Illinois taxes. And the same goes for Illinois workers coming to Wisconsin. So, we're not going to be able to fill all these positions simply with Wisconsin workers alone. This is going to be an opportunity for Wisconsin to attract talent, to attract workers. And I think we have worked very well in collaboration with other states, but other states want Foxconn. This was a highly competitive process, and I'm not sure whether we offered the most or the least, but I do know that we have a lot to offer in terms of our natural resources, being so close to Lake Michigan, being so close in proximity to other states, and also our talented workforce. You look at Wisconsin and you think there is a state that produces things. There is a state with a background in manufacturing. And if you look at all the states in competition, I think it makes sense to go to Wisconsin because we are ready, willing, and able to make this a success.
I've got a quick follow-up on something that Representative Anderson mentioned. Are you comfortable with a proposed campus of 20 million square feet being exempt from having an environmental impact statement?
I think there's precedent there. If I'm correct, Amazon had the same opportunity to be exempted from the environmental impact statement. And I just want to note that all of the environmental protections from air and water to waste removal are all still intact. And I think when you have a project of this size, it makes sense to streamline that initial application process, because if it goes through the traditional method of application, it could be decades until we're able to implement a project of this size. So in this case, I think it does work, and I think it makes sense.
Representative Anderson, would you be against this deal if Foxconn wanted to build in Dane County and filling up the Fitchburg business development zone or anything?
No, absolutely. This is a stand for the people of the state of Wisconsin as a whole. It's a deal in which I think every taxpayer that isn't receiving a job directly from this deal is going to be on the hook. And here's the way I look at it. I think it's important what Adam touched on was that we need to look at this deal from a long-term perspective. 15 years from now, what kind of workforces are they going to be looking at? What degree of is there going to be automation that's going to eliminate the jobs that are going to be there? Not only that, but what I'm really concerned about, and what no one seems to be talking about, is that this deal presupposes 15 years of economic growth. We already have a hard time meeting our budget requirements with, $700 million in road bonding now and trying to figure out what we're going to do about the transportation budget. These are during good economic times. What's going to happen when a recession hits in 5, 10, 15 years or whatever it is? And we're still going to be on the hook for hundreds of millions of dollars to Foxconn every year while still trying to manage everything else. I just don't think that it's a responsible way to budget for the entire state. So regardless of whether it was in Fitchburg or Southeast Wisconsin or wherever, I'm genuinely worried about all the people in the state of Wisconsin that are going to have to be held accountable for this deal.
He's worried about the $2.85 billion that Foxconn is scheduled to get over the next 15 years, and then it's only over the remaining years up through 2042, 43, the numbers you've seen, that the company investment outweighs the benefits. So you concerned about the $2.85 billion over the next 15, Representative?
Well, the $2.85 billion is a best case scenario. That is if we do have 13,000 new jobs, because it is based on growth. So if the 13,000 jobs aren't created, it won't be $2.85 billion. So that is a best case scenario. In that scenario with 13,000 new jobs, I think that's a great investment. But I think it's a mistake to look at this deal in terms of government revenue, right? This is not about generating more revenue for the government to spend on other things. This is about creating good paying jobs for the people of Wisconsin and bringing billions of dollars investment into southeastern Wisconsin. So I'm not judging this deal based on government revenue, but just to touch on that projection, that 43 or whatever projection, that's based on static wage growth. So that would assume that the workers don't get a pay raise for 15 years. If you just adjust for inflation, that number comes down dramatically. So I think that's a mistake in the calculations. I'm not sure if those are the rules that the Fiscal Bureau has to assess by, that there won't be any increase in the wages. But if you just adjust those wages for inflation, those numbers drop dramatically, and we do have a better return on investment over a shorter period of time. But again, I think it's a mistake to judge this deal simply based on government revenue.
Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I think if you talk to most people in the state of Wisconsin, when you ask them what their wages feel like, I think they feel pretty stagnant. So I think it's a little, it's probably disheartening for people to hear that you're assuming that there's going to be all this wage growth from this deal, particularly those people that are working those blue-collar jobs in manufacturing. They've seen their wages pretty stagnant over the past few years. But again, I think that when we talk about the investment that we're making through this deal, typically what we offer when it comes to tax incentives is about $2,500 per job. This Foxconn deal, we're going to be spending somewhere between $15,000 and $19,000 per job to bring Foxconn here to the state of Wisconsin. Look, you could, with enough corporate welfare, you could bring people here to grow orange trees. I don't think necessarily it's a smart idea, but we need to be making the kind of responsible choices when it comes to how we're going to be attracting people to the state of Wisconsin. Right now, we're spending not just hand and foot, but mouth and arm and leg and everything else to try to bring Foxconn here. We're not being responsible with taxpayers' money.
Do you want to respond?
Yeah, I don't think the company that's going to grow orange trees is going to generate $150 billion a year. You know, you can do a lot for entrepreneurs and startups, and you never know what's going to pan out, right? I hate to make sports analogies, but a lot of ways, this is trying to bring an all-star MVP to our team. When you look at, you know, doing things for startups and entrepreneurs and companies that you're not sure if it's going to pan out, now there's a risky investment. If you just create some new company out of $3 billion, you don't know if they're going to be successful. You don't know if they're going to be able to create jobs. Here's a company with a track record of success that generates $150 billion of revenue a year. And they have continually increased jobs in their company every year for 40 years. So this is a company with a track record, one that's going to be an industry leader in an industry that doesn't even exist in North America. This is going to put us on track to be the leader in electronics manufacturing in North America. And I think that is a great investment.
What benchmarks, let's assume that it passes the Assembly on Thursday and passes the Senate, and the governor signs it within 4 to 5 weeks. Since you've talked to company representatives, what would you expect to have occurred 1 year from now? Construction to start, hiring to start? Give us your vision 1 year out if this deal is approved, signed into law.
You know, I think the construction will start. I'm not sure that, you know, we're clearly not going to get to 13,000 jobs within 1 year. I'd imagine between 3,000 and 5,000 jobs.
I think one of the goals is 3,000 jobs by the Foxconn plans to be operational in 2020 with potentially 3,000 workers. Sorry for interrupting.
No, I think that's a good benchmark. And I think, you know, in terms of, you know, measuring the success, it's almost like trying to measure a mountain with a measuring stick. You know, I mean, it's difficult to project exactly the type of growth we're going to see and the type of impact we'll see in sales tax, the type of impact we'll see in property tax, the type of impact we'll see just in terms of the supply chain when you have billions of dollars flowing into construction. So I think it's going to have a tremendously positive impact even within a year. But I think, you know, you'll see probably 3,000 employees. You know, you won't see the type of 13,000 employees overnight. It's going to take some time to get there. But at the same time, our tax incentives are based on creating these new jobs. So if they, you know, only create 3,000 jobs, then they're only going to get the tax credit for those 3,000 jobs. They're not going to see the amount that $2.85 billion within that time, because it's going to require 13,000 jobs to get there.
And I think that's a big reason why I offered my amendment up to try to require that the WEDC actually do the proper clawback provisions if they didn't meet the standards of the deal that they set forth. You know, the WEDC has a really poor track record when it comes to protecting Wisconsin taxpayer dollars when it comes to doing these kinds of deals. And these are deals that are much smaller in proportion, let alone something worth $3 billion. So the fact that for some reason your colleagues on the other side of the aisle didn't want to mandate that the WEDC actually hold Foxconn accountable concerns me.
You know, I think that's built into the language. I think if they don't create that amount of new jobs, they won't receive that full benefit. And, you know, I'm not going to sit here and, you know, defend WEDC. I know they've had some troubles in the past, but I've been encouraged with some of the changes that they've made. And I think that a lot of lessons were learned in the past, and that is why the incentive package is shaped the way it is. That if there is no construction, there's no tax incentive. If there is, you know, they're not hiring the amount of people they say they're going to hire, well, then they're not going to receive the full credit. And I think a lot of those protections are built into the actual legislation. And I also think it's a mistake and completely theoretical and a fallacy to think that they're going to invest $10 billion of construction and then just not employ the proper amount of people to make it a success. It wouldn't make logical sense for a company to invest that amount of money just to receive tax incentives. You know, they are investing in Wisconsin, and we are investing in the workforce.
Democrats yesterday on your committee offered an amendment. 70% of the jobs would have to go to Wisconsin residents. You said that there are legal potential problems with that. Had you been advised by Ledge Counsel, the lawyers that advise lawmakers, that you cannot write a 70% standard into a deal like this, Representative?
I was not advised on the 70% number. I was advised that if you require a company to hire only Wisconsin workers, that could pose a problem. But I also think that we're going to need workers from all over the country. I think this is going to be an opportunity to attract workers. I think if you have that 13,000 number that we're talking about, we're not going to be able to hire that many people simply from Wisconsin. We're going to need engineers from all over the country. And I think this is going to be an opportunity for us to attract talent, to actually bring people to Wisconsin. And you know what? I think that's great. You know, I grew up in Illinois, I came to Wisconsin, and I fell in love with this state. And I think that's going to happen in large numbers. People are going to move here for opportunity. They're going to love the people, love the opportunity, love the fact that we have such a great state with natural resources, and they'll probably end up liking the Packers too. So I think that it's a net positive to attract people here, and I think it's going to be a mistake if we start putting strict restrictions on them saying, well, you have to hire X amount of Wisconsin workers, because they need to be flexible to make that workforce work.
Any follow-up?
Well, I will say that I think there was a reason why Foxconn wanted another $252 million in transportation bonding to try to shore up
That's
the road.
That's I-94
Yeah.
in Racine County,
Yeah,
potentially.
So it's
depending on contingent federal funds, excuse me.
Yeah, no. And so I think the goal is to make sure that people can come up from Illinois in order to get these jobs. And so I think that there were also a few amendments offered up by my Democratic colleagues to try to make transportation a more viable option from places other than Illinois. That way we can try to encourage more Wisconsin workers to get access to these jobs.
Well, you mentioned transportation. I want to now read only part of the statement that Representative David Crowley, who's the chair of the Milwaukee Democratic Ledge Caucus, said is 2 sentences long. He did it after he voted against it. With unemployment of African Americans in Wisconsin at a staggering 11.1%, sentence 1, what is the benefit of creating these jobs in southeastern Wisconsin if the largest population of unemployed and underemployed workers have no feasible way to get to these jobs? So is there a racial factor in this debate, Representative?
Well, I think, I don't want to touch on the racial factor particularly. David is, I've worked with him very closely on this, and I think that he has offered some good input on this, and that's why we are looking at that $20 million increase that started as workforce training funds, but we also
Next biennium,
and we adjusted the language for employment services, so that way there is some flexibility to potentially use transportation or replicate the Joseph Project, and try to move workers from areas like Milwaukee down to Racine or Kenosha to make sure that they are able to work. But I think the company is actually going to take the lead on this. If you look at what Amazon's done, they have programs, the busing programs that they've done without government help, that they're able to move workers to the Amazon factory. So I think the free market in some ways is going to help dictate. If they need workers, they're going to find the workers where they are living and move them to where that job is available. So I think in a lot of ways we have addressed these concerns by flexibility within the Workforce Training Fund to potentially look at transportation options. But I think ultimately Foxconn is going to take the lead on this and be able to move people to the place that they need for their job.
Because it's in their best interest, of course, to find workers who've been trained potentially with this $20 million that could be voted on the next biennium.
Exactly.
Any response before? I have a question for you, but go ahead if you want.
Sure. No, I guess I would say that I would agree that I'd hope that Foxconn would take the initiative to try to bring in more workers from the Wisconsin area. And I think that the opportunity available to individuals that are we've dealt with issues of segregation for a long time, and that this is not just a single fix-all for that problem, that it's a much more complicated issue and I'm sure Representative Crowley understands that as well, but that I do hope that this is a balm on that
issue. Representative Anderson, if 5 Democrats voted against it in committee yesterday, if most Democrats on the floor on Thursday vote against it, and Foxconn does break ground and begin hiring, are you afraid that voters are going to punish Democratic candidates in the November 2018 election?
Absolutely not.
Not?
I think it's got to be a question as to whether or not it. What we're most concerned with is what's going to happen to the Wisconsin taxpayer, not just in 2018, but 2020, 2024, 2043. So right now we don't have the proper assurances to guarantee that the Wisconsin taxpayer is going to be protected with this deal. Again, $3 billion. It's unheard of. I believe that it's an unconscionable number. So when it comes to the actual employment of individuals, we're for that. And again, from my perspective, and I can't speak for any of my colleagues, this deal should have been negotiated in a collaborative way amongst the various states. And that way, if Illinois is going to get a certain percentage of the jobs that are going to be coming to this deal, they ought to be pitching in and chipping in to help lessen the burden on the Wisconsin taxpayers. Again, I'm not against the idea of bringing Foxconn to this region. It should just have been negotiated as a regional project, not just a Wisconsin project. We have to stop looking at these deals as who can undercut the other one the most and start saying, how can we start bringing better jobs to the United States of America?
Is this a safe no vote for Madison area Democrats like you that either are unopposed or don't have stiff competition in a election?
I don't know. I genuinely don't know the answer. That's up to each individual representative to make that decision. I do know that a lot of my colleagues, like Representative Taylor, has taken a pretty strong stance against that. But again, I don't think it has anything to do with the local politics. I think we're all taking a look at this and saying, how is this going to impact people in Green Bay and Neenah, Wisconsin, and just like people across the state? And from that perspective, from the very beginning, that's why I've been nervous about this deal, and it's why I've been such a vocal opponent.
Do you think, though, that Democrats that vote against this deal, assuming Foxconn makes significant and measurable progress within a year, what are Assembly Republicans going to say about Democrats in the November 2018 election who voted against it? Representative?
I don't think we need to say much. I think people are going to see that Republicans are out there working to bring jobs and investment into Wisconsin. People can see that, and I just want to touch on one thing Representative Anderson said. This is not unprecedented. Tesla spent over $6 billion Nevada spent over $6 billion in incentives bringing Tesla to Nevada. Pennsylvania spent a huge amount of an incentive package to bring Google into Pittsburgh. And you're looking in West Virginia right now, they're talking about a $4.5 billion package to prop up the coal industry, right? This is not an unprecedented deal. This is a deal that is unprecedented in terms of the largest foreign investment in American history, but it's not unprecedented for states to offer incentive packages of this type of magnitude to have a huge economic development package. And I think in terms of the politics of it, I think none of us are exactly sure how the politics of this are going to shake out. And to Jimmy's credit and to a lot of the Democrats' credit, we have been talking about the policy in Madison. And you see that in our Committee on Jobs and the Economy. I think all of us are very focused on trying to get this policy right. And I think ultimately the politics are going to shake out however they do. And we have to just be concerned about putting the best product forward.
You mentioned Pennsylvania. Has anybody from Foxconn or their representative or their lobbyist explained to you why Foxconn at one point made a promise to Pennsylvania that it didn't live up to?
Nobody has, no, but I know that the parameters of that deal had changed. So I think that is one of the reasons we have tried to improve this bill without really changing any aspects of the memorandum of understanding that was negotiated between Governor Walker's administration and Foxconn representatives, because we realize, investors need certainty. Investors want certainty when they're looking to invest in a region or in a state. So I think that the parameters of that deal likely changed. The politics might have gotten in the way, and we're doing the best we can here to make sure that doesn't happen in Wisconsin.
You want to respond?
Well, I will say that, when it comes to economic development, the idea that this is going to be over a 15-year timeline, I think is, again, worrisome. Like we talk again about uncertainty. We've created certainty on the side of Foxconn by putting this deal on the backs of Wisconsin taxpayers. But again, we've created uncertainty for the actual taxpayers themselves because we have no idea what's going to be happening over these next 15 years. And so we create a situation where we're going to be owing Foxconn money every single year, up to $100 to $300 million every single year out of the pockets of Wisconsin taxpayers, without knowing what's going to be happening to the overall budget, without knowing what's going to happen to the overall economy, without knowing if at the end we're going to actually see automation completely overtake the jobs that are available. It's such a long-term project to put onto the backs of Wisconsin taxpayers that just makes me incredibly nervous for the people.
In response, Adam?
I want to touch on the automation thing because this is something I feel very passionately about. Technology is not replacing workers. Technology is making workers more efficient. It might be changing the nature of the workforce, but it is not replacing workers. And we're going to need skilled workers to operate machines, to operate this technology, but the studies just don't bear out that technology and automation is replacing workers. Technology and automation is making workers more efficient. And I think ultimately the nature of the workforce is going to change. We're going to need highly skilled, talented workers, and this is not an assembly line plant, right? This is not a plant where people are going to be putting things together. This is a plant where people are going to be operating technology, and I am not concerned at all that technology is going to replace these workers, because ultimately technology is going to make these workers more efficient.
Okay, I have one more question for you before we go to what amounts to closing remarks
Sure.
and the civil dialogue. Why is Fiserv a part of this? They're getting $12.5 million in tax credits. That has nothing to do, Mr. Lang said, with the Foxconn deal. Why are they a part of this bill? Why couldn't that travel separately or in the budget, Representative?
Sure. Well, I think that for one, we don't want to lose Fiserv. Fiserv is an incredible company that is being lured to other states by other states offering incentive packages to try to recruit our talent elsewhere. We live in a highly competitive global marketplace where other states are doing the best they can to try to attract and bring good companies and good workers to Wisconsin. And this is mostly a timing issue. They are looking at different alternatives in terms of where they want to grow, where they want to expand. And we thought that this is something we had to move on immediately to make sure that we're not losing a company as great as Fiserv. But it's not just about Fiserv. This is expanding the economic development zones within this language, so it increases from 25 to 30. So this would be part of that, but there's also going to be other companies that benefit from this language as well. So it's not just particularly Fiserv, but it is expanding the ability to offer incentive packages to other companies to make sure that we can attract and retain the talent. And you saw that yesterday with an announcement that Generac is going to be expanding in Waukesha, creating 400 new positions. That goes directly to this language because part of this is expanding that enterprise zone that they are taking advantage of. So this language impacts a lot of companies in Wisconsin. Fiserv is one of them, but there will be more as well.
Any thoughts on the package being Foxconn plus Fiserv?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, again, indicative of the race to the bottom, that all the states are competing against one another, and who ends up losing is the Wisconsin taxpayer, because they're the ones that have to pay out of their pockets to try to keep these businesses here in the state. And again, it comes down to a question of fairness. Like, not every business gets access to these tax credits, but I'm sure every business in the state of Wisconsin wants them. So the idea that we're going to be picking and choosing winners when, again, we hear over and over again about the importance of free enterprise and the free market, it seems to be contradictory. So again, we need to be protecting the Wisconsin taxpayers first. We don't do that by competing against other states to see who can give most of the Wisconsin taxpayer money to these businesses.
Okay, closing statements. I want you to, as if the closing arguments on the floor on Thursday, if it's not changed, you're going to vote no. Why you're going to vote no and why you're going to vote yes. Representative Anderson, you get to go first.
So, as I've been saying from the very beginning, this is about protecting Wisconsin taxpayers. We're about to give $3 billion, literally $3 billion, coming out of the pockets of Wisconsin taxpayers to the Foxconn Corporation. It's a multinational, multi-billion foreign corporation that could open up a plant here in Wisconsin without the need of these kinds of incentive packages. The only reason they get these incentive packages is because, again, it's a competition amongst the states as to who can undercut the other one the most. And instead, what we need is leaders at the top. What Governor Walker should have been doing from the very beginning is reaching out to these other states and seeing how we could make this a regional project. But instead, he's more interested in actually receiving all the credit for bringing Foxconn to the state instead of actually being concerned about the Wisconsin taxpayer. So again, it's about protecting Wisconsin taxpayers. This deal, given over the fact that it's going to last over 15 years, creates so much uncertainty that I think in the end, Wisconsin taxpayers are going to be on the hook, and it's going to be incredibly dangerous for them.
Why are you going to vote yes?
Well, first of all, without risk, there's no reward. And people want jobs. They want opportunity. They want Wisconsin leaders to take the lead on providing them with jobs and opportunity. And if you talk about, taxpayers, I think ultimately this is a great deal for taxpayers. It's going to increase our revenues, and over time, it's going to provide, if you look at sales tax, all the people that move here, all the people that are working here, they're going to be going out to lunch, they're going to be buying things, and I think ultimately this will have incredibly positive impact on Wisconsin taxpayers. But ultimately, this is about jobs. This is about bringing jobs to Wisconsin by the thousands. And in our Committee on Jobs and the Economy, we made a goal to do what we can to create good family-supporting jobs, to try to bring investment into Wisconsin, and to try to attract talent. This legislation does all three. It will create thousands of jobs, bring billions of dollars of new investment into Wisconsin, and finally, attract talent. Because for years, we've been losing talent. People go to the coasts, people go to other states looking for opportunity, and guess what? Now they can find it in Wisconsin. If I think, there's one thing that I want to do in the future to help this bill, we should run TV ads all over America saying, come to Wisconsin to work. We have jobs. And I think ultimately this is going to be a huge, huge benefit to everyone in Wisconsin by really revitalizing our manufacturing industry. We're going to see a renaissance in manufacturing. We're going to bring digital and electronic manufacturing into Wisconsin, and for an industry we've never had before. So many times we hear about stories about companies shipping jobs overseas. Well, guess what? We're bringing them back to Wisconsin. We're going to be a global leader in an industry that is only expanding, that is only growing, and I'm proud to be on the forefront of that. And I think ultimately Wisconsinites and the state as a whole will see this as a good deal. And it is a big investment, it's a large investment, but I think ultimately it's a very worthy investment, and it's going to help Wisconsin as a whole.
Very valuable civil dialogue. I want to thank Republican Representative Adam Neylon of Pewaukee and Democratic Representative Jimmy Anderson of Fitchburg. Thank you, gentlemen. And as always, you can watch Thursday's debate on WisconsinEye. Thank you.
Thank you.